No idea. They said it was a few owners ago. They've owned it since 2007.
Okay.
The people before them owned it since 2003.
Oh, right.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, these are all tongue and groove, so it's like once you
Yeah.
Right.
you gotta like work on the corner and then keep going with it in order to see anything.
It looks really straight along there where I see your flashlight shining.
Yeah, I mean, through here I don't see like broken joints or anything, so like I said, it looks like it's relatively recent. It's in pretty good shape. But of course, we'll have no idea if they're hollow inside or if they're filled with cement with rebar. But I think that's less relevant than just keeping an eye on for damage or water coming through or anything like that.
Yeah. So what we're looking to do with the basement is we're looking to remodel it, take all the paneling out, take all the, maybe work with some of the framing, but even maybe redo a lot of this framing. Looks like this framing might actually be kind of good to work with already because it's already attached to the foundation. But and do you see any red flags with the way things are?
So
What would you be concerned with?
the main things I would be concerned with the house is mostly pertaining to this wall. Once you get the paneling off, you want to get a good look at this wall's condition, make sure there's not some weird local anomaly. Because I mean, this part looks good, but this is also the farthest away from the basement walls. If I were going to see damage, it would be probably like right along through here where the wall is closest, but we're sort of out away from the corners.
Right.
So that would be something I would look for. I would look into what's going on with this.
Okay.
This sort of feels like someone took the original framing and modified it. So either they pulled out a post and put this one in its place, or they might have moved it. This may or may not be the original location of the post. It's hard to say because seeing around a post like this is not typical for the houses.
There's another post right here that lines up, and then it looks like there's a bump out there.
Right, so there's probably a beam here through the middle,
Right.
but because this one's around,
Totally.
it indicates to me that
This
at least
actually
this part
might
has
be.
been modified.
It might not be a round post.
That's what I'm wondering if they use this
Actually,
round
this doesn't
stuff
look like
to.
a
Filled around it.
Actually,
Yeah.
it's not a round post. This is just a geometric, custom,
Beautiful
round job.
addition.
Yeah.
So yeah, just
Yeah.
since everything is hidden, once you
Yeah.
start taking everything off, you're gonna want to look for everything. Look for joists that have been cut or modified if they did stuff with the plumbing upstairs.
Right.
Look for signs of water damage around the kitchen or the bathrooms.
Yeah.
Up here, the crack. It's hard to get a read on what the underlying wall looks like because that front is skim coated already, and so the cracks that we're seeing is actually in the skim coat.
Yeah.
Typically, in those situations, what we usually recommend is that you go have someone come in and do what's called an epoxy injection, and part of that is the epoxy will bond a little bit better to the crack, and that's both to protect the crack to keep water from coming in, and also it gives you a good baseline to see if there's anything continuing to happen. Because if you filled it with mortar, the mortar will shrink and crack with age anyway. So you'll see it crack and you won't know if it's cracking because it's normal or something else. But if you fill that with epoxy and if that crack reopens after the epoxy, then you know that that front probably needs to have a little bit of stabilization work.
Okay.
Based on the limited area, I don't think the whole house is settling. I think if that corner is still moving, it's just because that area is just sitting over fill. And so if it had to be stabilized, it could be, well, if you saw the cracking continue to happen, you probably will want to get what's called a geotechnical engineer to take a look.
Okay.
It could be something as simple as just area drainage. If the water is sort of coming in there and sitting, saturating the soil, they may just say, just divert the water away. If it is sitting on I don't expect it to sit on really bad fill, but there probably is fill because they build the basement and they fill up the walls behind it.
Yeah.
It would probably need like one screw pile at most to stabilize that.
Okay.
Just because of how small the area is.
One screw pile. What is that?
That's one of a variety of ways that you could stabilize a sinking foundation, and what it looks like is basically looks like a big drill bit,
Okay.
more or less.
Yeah.
For a job that size, it would probably be about 4 inches in diameter, and they just screw it down into the dirt until they reach what's called the geotech will specify, screw it down at so much torque until it stops moving. And at that point, they consider that it has a certain amount of capacity, so you leave the screw in place, and then you attach the foundation to that screw. That screw basically takes the job of being the foundation.
Oh, got it. Oh.
And so the rest of the concrete just sort of attaches to that.
Huh. What's something like that cost?
It's hard to say because it is such a small job, since you're only looking at probably one screw.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for bigger jobs, we've been quoted like $1,000 to $1,500 per pile.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But for something this small, they probably do like a minimum visit charge, so it could be $1,800 or $2,000 because it's just one screw.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
It's hard to say.
They got to bring the same equipment out, and
Right.
etc.
Right. But that's, again, mostly dependent on what the geotech would find. If that's continuing to be a problem, like I said, it could just be drainage
Okay.
rather than the whole thing settling.
And right now we're talking about why there might have been some seepage of water in, or why the the foundation might be settling.
Right.
That's what we're talking about.
Right. What are the potential causes for that crack?
Is that correct?
Because not so much that we care why the crack is, or that the crack is there now. We're mostly concerned with, is it going to continue to be a problem?
Right.
If it's just sort of moderate fill, it's very possible that the geotech would say, well, it was bad fill, but it's done moving now. Because usually when you build something over fill, unless there's something really bad going on, it would move for 5-10 years and then stop.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that could be the case here.
Right.
That's again one of the reasons why we want to fill it with epoxy. Just see in a couple of years, is it still moving or not? Because if it's not moving, then there's no concern.
Got it.
So yeah, I would definitely say epoxy inject that side, both the horizontal crack, and you've got a couple of vertical cracks on the same wall. I would fill all three.
Right.
And then the skim coat around,
Mm-hmm.
sort of in places where it's really bad, especially in this back corner.
Right.
This side, sort of the same deal. I mean, like I said, it was probably built on fill, so the settling is pretty expected. Just keep an eye on it, see if it continues to get worse or not.
Okay.
Again, it could be done,
Okay.
but it's hard to say because of the interior finishes being relatively new. I can't see if there are any reopening of cracks or anything that would tell me that that's still moving.
Right. What would you say is the worst case scenario with the foundation of this house?
Worst case scenario would be if the wall is failing and that corner continues to get worse, and the back is still settling and the front's still settling, that's your worst case scenario, but I don't see all that being terribly likely. At most, I would expect this is probably your most likely potential, just because it's hidden.
Sure.
Everything else we can sort of see and kind of surmise based on what we see.
Right.
That if it continued to move, it's probably a relatively minor thing.
Okay.
Because if these two areas were involved with a major settlement issue, we would see it in the rest of the house as well.
Right.
Because you're not going to have something so bad right in front
Right.
that doesn't affect the house 5 feet away.
My instinct or my sense is that they've been settling over a long period of time. That those additions have been added on, and that they've been.
Well, like I said,
has that kind of feel to it.
if- A typical scenario is they put the addition over basically yard dirt,
Right.
and in the first 10 or 15 years it settles and then tapers off.
But we don't know the date of those additions.
Nope.
You could try looking in the permit history to see if there's anything on them.
Right.
Sometimes you find something, sometimes you don't.
Have you looked at the permit history?
I did, and I don't see anything under historical, and I don't see anything under regular. You could go down to the permit office and see if they have anything in addition on microfiche.
Okay.
But usually, if this was like 60s and 70s, it would still sometimes show under historic permit.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I have to go to microfiche to get it, it's probably from a while ago.
Well, you never know. I
Oh,
mean,
maybe not.
They're-
Okay.
usually they can give you some sort of idea just doing the lookup on their computer
Okay.
to see if anything comes up.
Okay.
If
The
it's
permit
not on the
being
computer,
office.
then it's not likely to be on microfiche unless it's, you're right, older than 70s.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it would be surprising unless this house had some sort of historical merit to have microfiche dating that far back for this. 'Cause
Oh.
they don't keep a lot of residential records,
Yeah.
especially if it's relatively minor work like a little addition or something. If this thing
Okay.
had like a second floor put on or
Uh-huh.
something,
Uh-huh.
then you would possibly see something still in records.
Okay.
But it used to be for the longest time the city threw out everything that was residential after 5 or 10 years,
Mhm.
Okay.
and so they'd only archive the stuff that was sort of notable to them.
Cool. If you were considering buying this house, what would you do? You have any red flags? Are there any things that you would do before you made that decision?
I would want to get a better look at this wall.
Okay.
Both from the standpoint of its condition and to try to get a better feel for if there is chronic water seepage. I mean, it seems pretty dry in here now, but everything's closed up and you can't really tell. If you find,
Right.
rotted framing under here somewhere,
Right.
which is not terribly likely, because especially with wood paneling, I'd expect it to. We would see it in the panels as well.
No, but these panels are pretty thick.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
They're surprisingly thick. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Don't you think if there was some moisture, we would see some evidence on it, evidence on the carpet along here?
It's hard to say. It depends on how much moisture you get.
Okay.
In some houses, it doesn't amount to more than just the wall being damp.
Mhm.
Other houses, you end up with a creek.
Mhm.
Just based
Yeah.
on this condition, I would expect it to be more on the damp side, less the creek side, because this carpet looks too old to have been,
Right.
recently replaced because of water damage. And the outlets don't look terribly new.
Right.
And so I would expect this to be at least 10, 15 years old.
Mhm.
Okay.
It could be worthwhile to check the permits also because of this wall.
Okay.
If it's recent, it may show up in the permits.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing you want to watch for when you look up with the city is just to see what kind of square footage they think the house has.